Welcome to History and Future of Mostly Higher Education. Jim, thank you so much for letting us interview you today and for welcoming us to your beautiful home with all of your artworks and being able to talk to us today about the future of the humanities and the future of higher education.
Well, I'm pleased to be with you, Kathy.
Thank you. So let's start with the big question. What are the future of the humanities? What do you see as the future of the humanities?
Well, there are many challenges, and if the future is not bright, that is going to be awful for society. The humanities are fundamental to all of us. And one of the great underappreciated aspects of the current kind of vocabulary of higher education is an assumption that the humanities are not central to job creation. It's also an assumption that the humanities are not central to life. And let me just begin with each of these if you'd like. Yes. But if you ask anyone in the business community what they seek in people that they want to hire, they all say they want people that are good critical thinkers. They all want people that can think imaginatively. They want people that write well and express well. Well, what better way is there to learn to write well than to read great literature? What better way is there to think critically than to have discussions around great issues? What better way is there to provide perspective than to study history? And we're in a global world environment. And unless we understand other cultures, we're not going to do well. Now, as far as the world is concerned, there are wonderful things that are happening. There are also some not so perfect things happening. And so you take the subject of national security. My gosh, how do you know when to intervene in circumstances if you don't understand what's happening, and if you don't understand the implications of a given act versus another act? Arguably, the United States of America in recent wars in this century, this decade, has expended not millions of dollars, not billions of dollars, but trillions of dollars. Those are very expensive undertakings, and there's been loss of limb, there's been loss of money, and there's been also a loss of reputation. People think we're not thinking well around the globe. And I think America is going to have to come to grips with this.
I recently read a newspaper editorial that says, who needs cultural anthropology? And I thought, oh my goodness, in the world we live in now, what could be more important than being able to understand actually how different cultures operate and how we react with different cultures?
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. What about higher education? Some people are saying, well, on the internet you can learn online, you can make your own education. We don't need formal education anymore, formal higher education anymore.
Well, there are a couple ways of looking at it. The new, whether you call them MOOCs, whether it be just access to information through the internet, is terrific. On the other hand, it's no substitute for the interchange one gets in education. In the 19th century, people used to talk about sitting on a log with a mentor. And it was wonderful imagery. But the fact of the matter is, if you think of an academic institution, you have a teacher, a professor that's going to be expressing views and listening to a student's views and criticizing and vice versa. And then you also have the interplay of other students. Anyone that goes to any kind of academic institution knows you learn from your professors, they learn from you, but you learn from your fellow students.
You have a roommate that's studying religion and another roommate that's studying history. All of a sudden, the two discuss things, and you discuss the same subject from different perspectives, but you pick up language. I remember as a student hearing a roommate talk about eschatology. What's eschatology? I had no idea. You pick up things from your roommates. And so education that involves the bump in the log meta circumstance, it also involves kind of sideways looking as you listen to a professor critique a fellow student. You pick up on that. You pick up on when a student presents a perspective different than yours and different from the professor's. And quite frequently, there's no exact right or wrong.
Many people think differently, and it's great to pick up how other people think, because it adds to your body of knowledge, and most of all, to your capacity to assess and judge.
What about the role of the humanities in higher education? And there's some universities now, some legislators are saying that, an English major should cost more than a computer science major, because English isn't really vital and doesn't get you jobs.
Well, there are a lot of statistics that will indicate that isn't the case, but more importantly, we're in a world you need both. I mean, the sciences are doing extraordinarily well, technology is doing extraordinarily well. By the same token, science has this dark side. And to me, the greatest observation of the last century on this subject comes from Einstein. And he said that splitting the atom had changed everything except our way of thinking. And what he meant by that is that we are now in a world in which not only can wars be waged, but civilization itself can be jeopardized. That's the meaning of a weapon of mass destruction. I mean, this is a dangerous world. Now, science has brought us these enormous capacities to computate quicker, to actually heal the sick. But it's also brought us some great dangers. It means we're all vulnerable. We're more vulnerable than we've ever been before. We're vulnerable in a working sense to, let's say, international trade. We're vulnerable in a very human sense to national security challenges. And every year they become closer to home. And we're going to need to understand the world. We're also going to need to understand ourselves. And so science without the humanities absolutely guarantees chaos. The humanities without science guarantees no economic progress. But you need to look at this as an envelope that sides work together.
I love that quote from Einstein, too, because I personally think that education is vital, but education has to also prepare us, adults, lifelong learners, and young people, for the world they live in now, not the world they were born into, but the world they're going to have to face. And there's so many issues, such as the ones you just mentioned, with security, privacy issues, all kinds of things with the internet that, a 9-year-old can do things on the internet that we would be terrified about if we really knew what the implications were for not predators. That's kind of a smokescreen. It's not really a statistically meaningful thing, but privacy, security, those kinds of issues are major, major issues now. And we don't really teach those subjects anywhere in school. They don't really fit because education is so much divided up into silos of science, technology, humanities, arts, English, anthropology, different fields. We don't really put them together. What you're talking about sounds like a very integrated way of thinking about major science challenges together with major humanistic challenges.
Well, what's happened if you take American history? Our early founders, and if you take two in particular, Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin, it used to be said of Jefferson that he knew all the science that was then known in the world. And if you think about it, he probably did. Franklin himself was a scientist. These are extraordinary times. Now there is no scientist that knows anything except a fraction of what's known in science. And so science has extraordinarily expanded. And the humanities have also improved, but not near as quantumly as science has. And so one of the great questions is, can you bring the humanities to understand more of the sciences and vice versa? And I don't think the humanities can ignore science any more than science can ignore the humanities. And then there have to be changes. I mean, if we think of a century ago, an academic was very narrow in a particular discipline. Today, more and more disciplines are seeing cross-fertilizations within the humanities, and some are touching into the sciences. I think that has to increase, and this cross-disciplined approach to learning has got to develop to a greater extent. Some of it is happening somewhat naturally. Some of it, I think the academy can improve itself. I think one can look at courses in different kinds of ways, combine disciplines in new kinds of ways. But the structure of what you call the humanities, and that basically means history, literature, philosophy, related disciplines from archaeology and anthropology to comparative religion, are really central. And they're central to tying into the sciences. They're central to how we think in a business kind of way. They're also central to kind of life we want to live. I mean, the life of the mind. I mean, do we want to have a mind that isn't mindful? I mean, people have choices, and the chance to read great literature is a wonderful choice.
It's a wonderful choice. I'm going to take a little bit of a side question. You've dedicated your whole life to public service, and I'm in such admiration of the career you've had. If you were talking to a 22-year-old student today, would you recommend the same kind of life for them? Would you recommend a political life?
Absolutely. Now, I'm a big believer that all careers are equal. And it's what you put into a career that matters most. And now, the word career is awkward because most young people are going to have 5, 10, 15 jobs in their life. Maybe even more.
Yeah.
And maybe 2 or 3 at once. And so, when you think of the word career, you're really talking about life. And the strength of America is that there are a lot of options and a lot of different holes and pegs. And we all talk about pegs and round holes. And we've also, everybody's been involved in something that wasn't a perfect fit. And so one of the things that one has to learn is how to get out of that fit and get into something that fits a little better. And the capacity to look around and think and apply is something we all have to develop.